It's a great privilege to be on stage with so many amazing early-stage robotics companies that are creating the new robots that will have impact on our daily lives, the service robots and consumer robots that Henrik Christensen was talking about. And we're going to get a chance to dive a little deeper into what it's like going from idea to product, or from research to the real world. I'd like to ask each of our CEOs to just say a little bit about what it is that they're actually building and where you might run into it. Steve, would you like to start?
Thanks, Andra. So Savioke is a unfortunate choice of name. It looks like karaoke, so everybody says Savioke. But Savioke is a company that's about 4 years old. And we were founded by a number of people that came out of Whiil Garage. As Whiil Garage's funding ended, we looked around and said, what can we do? We've got a team of people who can build something in robotics. How can we get it out there? So we decided to build what, from a robotics point of view, is a relatively simple robot. It's a moving diff drive robot that moves around through spaces, and try to conquer the problem of what does it mean to be around people 24/7. So we built a delivery robot for hotels. And the robot will basically take something from the front desk of the hotel to a guest room, interact with the guest, deliver whatever it is, and then go back to the front desk and charge itself. And we've built that over the last few years. We've got about 50 of them out in the world, 50 different sites, and we're now starting in that kind of scaling phase as the next piece. So it's working, and people love it. We can talk about why that is, but fundamentally it's a delivery robot for indoors.
Just a quick poll. Has anybody met one of the Savioke robots at a hotel? Oh, that's good.
Arigatou gozaimasu.
Rich, would you like to tell us a little bit about Superflex?
So Superflex is a spin-out from SRI robotics program. It's based on work that we had done there under a DARPA program called Warrior Web. And Superflex is a wearable robotics product that is an alternative to exoskeletons. It's something that we call powered clothing, so integrating more lightweight power assist robotics into clothing. And part of what we've done in positioning ourselves in the market, and I more and more understand this context. So if you look around the room, everybody in this room is wearing clothes. No one is wearing robotics. And so our positioning, our approach and objective is to add functionality to clothing and to create more opportunity for clothing to be innovated and to benefit the quality of life that people have. So we're designing intelligent wearable strength into clothes that can allow people to have additional strength or power assist for improved mobility.
Another quick poll. If you could have a comfortable suit of clothing that helped you get in and up and down from your chair or pick things up, who would be wearing it in 5 years' time?
That's not enough of you.
Not too many early adopters. Think about how your back feels in 5 years' time. Yeah, I think there's a huge market out here waiting for our augmented robotics. Now, Sugie, can you tell me a little bit about...
My name is Sugie. So our company's mission is delivering fun and innovation to sidewalk travel for all. So our journey started from back in 2012. So I met a wheelchair user. He said, I gave up going to grocery store even just 2 blocks away. The reason is because, the wheelchair is, I don't say nothing happened, the innovation, but, it's small improvement. So that we need innovation. And then also, not only the wheelchair user, but also, we are facing an aging society, for most of developed country. So that's the demand for sidewalk travel, is really increasing. So that, we build personal electric vehicle for sidewalk travel who have difficulty walking. So we have actually the booth there, so you will try it on later. So currently, we have 70 members. So office in here, San Carlos, Tokyo, and also Taiwan. We OEM Taiwanese manufacturer. So I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you very much.
It's also kind of a nice synergy that you and Rich are seated together, because rather than, say, competitors, you could actually be partners. You each reach to the same market, but at different stages.
Exactly. So, and also what we're doing right now is not building hardware, but also we, doing like, providing a service like, the Savioke doing, in the airport. So building, B2B service for, let's say, easy to say, Uber for wheelchair in the airport. So those kind of things is also what we try to do right now.
Uber for wheelchairs at airports. My mother wants that.
Autonomous, yeah, self-driving, and then
Uber for autonomous wheelchairs at airports.
Right.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. And I can see these partnerships extending all the way across the panel. And Cory, do you want to say a little bit about Catalia Health?
Sure. So Catalia Health is a chronic disease management company. We think about what we do in healthcare first and foremost. The technology that we build does take the form of a robot, hence sitting up here. We'll be demoing them this afternoon, but we build this cute little robot that's about this tall, sits on a patient's countertop or bedside table, and talks to an individual every day about a disease that they're managing. So these conversations are really around symptoms, side effects, medications, whatever's going on with that person at that point in time. And the whole reason that we use a robot has less to do with technology and much more to do about psychology. The same reason that we're all sitting in this room. You could have all sat from the comfort of your home or office and watched a webcast of this, but being face-to-face really makes a difference. And it turns out that difference applies in technology. So Catalia Health is actually the second company I've started in this space, and the first one followed on from my PhD. So I've been working on this for about 15 or 16 years. So I think one of the common themes that we're seeing here is that many of these projects that have become the companies that we all represent up here go back quite a ways.
Thank you, Cory. And Shin, can you tell me about Seven Dreamers?
Yep, Seven Dreamers, we have developed the world's first fully automatic laundry folding robot. So back in 2005, 12 years ago, my wife, we have 4 kids. So she folds laundry every day and spending so many hours. And we estimated that in regular home families with 2 kids, in the whole life, people spending about a year of folding laundry and then separating and then bringing into the closet. So we thought it would be great to have a folding robot to do it. And it took us about 12 years finally to integrate vision analysis technologies, robotics technologies, and AI, artificial intelligence, all get together. And finally, we made prototypes a few years ago, and we're about to launch the product next year.
Well,
so yeah, and you'll be able to see the mock-up model here in the demo room later in the afternoon. And if you really want to see the working model, please come to CES in Las Vegas in January 2018.
Okay, and who doesn't want a robot to fold the laundry? Hands up if you don't want a robot to fold the laundry. What? You want to fold the laundry yourself? Oh, interesting.
Some people love folding.
I have to say, I am still waiting. That's true. It's called origami, isn't it? But some people, I'm still waiting for the robot that picks up the toys from the floor, which, maybe if the Roomba just has a larger garbage collection that could do it. It hasn't happened. I want to follow on some of the trends that we're seeing here, similar to what Henrik was pointing out earlier, that where the market today is for highly differentiated products, not general platforms. And one of the things I've seen in each of the journeys for your companies is that you're not doing a general platform. Even though Relay is starting to be a delivery robot, Steve, you started with a very targeted first use case, first customer scenario. So I would like to ask each of you, how differentiated, how much of a niche did you find it was necessary to create your first beachhead market?
So, for us, we think of, we're doing indoor delivery, so buildings are our market, and hotels are a really nice beachhead into that market. There's about 55,000 hotels in the US, of which some have outdoor corridors, but most of them are eligible for Relay. So it's a nice beachhead, Even within that, we still have to differentiate the product to customize it to each site, and that tends to be the way that the hotels decorate it and name it. They have branding standards. They want it to be part of their brand, and so you'll hear about Dash or Wall-E or some of these others, not Wall-E, that would be a Disney problem, but different names of robots that are all tied to the specific property, and really they're trying to imbue them with character. But as we go forward, we're thinking more and more about how do you maintain the ability to add character and at the same time balance that with providing a consistent user experience. So, we think of ourselves as a service company. We provide a delivery service. We want to make sure that that service is high quality and works every time. And at the same time, we'd like to let people customize it and tie it into their enterprise software and so on and so forth. But it has to work, and it has to keep that relay personality at some level so that it's the product that we designed and the service that we designed.
And would it be fair to say that you spent at least 2 years really focusing on hotels and perhaps focusing just on one hotel group initially?
Yeah, we started, you have to start somewhere. So we looked at the broad range of hotels. We landed a very nice pilot at the Aloft in Cupertino, which is still, that pilot's still going on, is still going very strong. It's not a pilot anymore. They use it every day. But we branched out quickly into other hotel brands because basically VCs required us to, right? You can't be a niche, you can't be such a niche product that you're going into one specific brand. On the other hand, it turns out that that's not even the right way to sell into hotels. So we learned a lot along the way. And after a couple of years, the nice thing about hotels is that they're very public. So people like FedEx came to us and said, hey, we see your robot in the hotel. We want to use it in this other application. And that was great for us because our view had always been we're going to expand beyond this beachhead. And it was a great sort of invitation to do so. People can see the product in action.
Thanks. And Rich, you're in many ways the youngest company here, and you've been through a few different ideas for where your beachhead market is. Can you tell me what your beachhead is now, where you hope it will go, and what are some of the iterations that you've been through to get there?
Yeah, I actually think that's the important part about this conversation is it's not about being a robotics company, it's about being a product company and having customers for the product that you're creating. And then the robotics part is really about the value that you can create with this new technology. And so when I was at SRI, we spent 7.5 years there, and part of what attracted me to go to SRI was the opportunity to spin out companies and to transition the technology that we were developing. And in every single case, grab it's on display here, came from our lab. A lot of people know Abundant. Every one of those companies had a customer that was being targeted, and the best work that we did at SRI always had a customer that had a strong problem being solved. So with Superflex, the opportunity with this new technology, this lightweight actuation that we're integrating into clothing, was being able to provide a real product for consumers that can assist with mobility. And I have a long background in medical rehab robotics. I've brought a robot to market for stroke rehabilitation. I've done assistive robotics, and in every case, those products go into large institutions and they never make it to consumers. So our focus is on powered clothing for consumers. It's lightweight. It's something that has a price point that should be reasonable for consumers, and it's something that just hasn't been achieved yet. Most of the technology is something that has gone mostly B2B institutional in focus. So, and definitely a beachhead for us is the senior market, the aging society. And so Andra asked how many people in here would actually use that kind of robot. I'll ask it a slightly different way. How many people, thanks Heinrich, how many people have a relative or a neighbor that is aging and starting to slow down? Or know of a friend or otherwise that would use a technology like that to help them be more mobile. So, yeah, a lot more people. And so, and if you look at just the demographics, our lead investor is based in Tokyo, Global Brain, who's here. They There's definitely the demographics are a driving force. You've seen the government, the programs that are being developed to support this kind of technology. So in the U.S., the need is almost as strong, at least the beginning need in terms of the opportunity commercially is definitely as strong. So our opportunity is to create something that will serve seniors, and just like curb cuts that help a mother pushing a baby in a stroller, this is a technology that will be available to anybody that wants to have additional strength in their clothing.
And I have to say, you know, for another use case, as someone who's had several children, your back takes a heck of a beating. And if you've got a 20-pound baby on one hip and another one dragging it, you know, I'm going, I needed power assist clothing. I always thought it was ironic that at the checkout at the supermarket, I'd pick up a sack of rice and they'd say, would you like a hand with that? And I'd look at the kids and say, you want to give me a hand with something else? It's heavier. But I've seen in the lab, you've had child-sized suits as well. So you were doing some projects with children with muscular dystrophy as well.
Yeah, so we're definitely looking at some medical rehab applications. So we have some work we're doing building suits for children with muscular dystrophy as a assistive diagnostic or therapeutic kind of device. And that's something that work will seed a broader opportunity in medical rehab. There's a lot of interest in, especially in Japan, for industrial and occupational safety versions. So those are parallel, longer-term developments that we're doing, but our real focus is to have a consumer-oriented product in the market by the middle of next year.
Thank you. Sugie, what was your original inspiration for Whiil, and has it gone through different directions in your pathway to product?
So how to create a market, right? So I would like to divide two parts. So one is B2C and one is B2B. So in terms of B2C, so there are already markets. So very easy to say, just replace like existing power wheelchair and the scooters, so that there are market already. But what we are struggling right now is that breaking a regulation. So for example, like, in Japan, so there is government, the authority. So for example, our device has like 3G module. So, tracking the data, diagnosis, remote diagnosis things. So that this is specifically good for both of users and dealers. But I don't want to say specific the name of the government, but they rejected to implement the 3G module things. The reason is because new things. It's kind of difficult to understand for them. So we have to take that out. So that means we would just provide the hardware stuff as a part of which in Japan right now. So that's what we have been doing right now is that talk with them, drinking, after drinking, negotiating for one years, and then currently, our position is kind of gray zone. So they are saying this gray, not black. So maybe 1 year later it could be okay, but that's the struggling things for B2C. B2B. So our marketing strategy is more like pull marketing strategy. So we're doing autonomous development for self-driving service. Key point is finding very, very right partner, 1, 2, 3 companies. So to get them, they require, we launched PR, big launch, the PR, and then get, the inquiry, and then we find out, the very, very enthusiastic companies who helps, the developing with us. Then, doing a test, and then get the proof. After that, we, we started to, expand. That's, the market strategy for B2B.
Thank you. We'll come back to marketing very soon. Cory, would you like to say a little bit about iterations to market, although I believe you've had a very, very clear product vision and product use case, but I believe the way that you've positioned that, you started off originally with the B2C idea, and now you're B2B2C. Could you expand a little on that?
Yeah, and that path has happened over about a decade now. So I started my first company just over 10 years ago. Before starting Catalia Health 3 years ago, I actually spent about a year focused really on exactly this question of what is the market and really understanding where in healthcare in the US specifically was there an opportunity for this product. And that has to be focused on a particular geographic market. Healthcare is different from country to country and different regions of the world. And so in the US, what that meant is our first customers are actually big pharma. So they're the ones that are spending the money on helping patients stay on therapy for longer. That said, from a product perspective, we're really building for the end user. We're building something that's really focused on what that person who's going to have this in their home is going to do with it from on a day-to-day basis, but thinking through where the market opportunity is and who's actually paying for what in healthcare leads to a different kind of customer. So we've got kind of two different areas of focus. We have to be selling to healthcare institutions while building a product that's appropriate for the end user.
Now, one of the early stages, and I think this might reflect on the fact that you've found significant value in doing the B2B2C pathway, but I know one of your first iterations, you were looking purely at B2C and were looking at things like weight loss. And I know I was ready for that robot. I wanted that robot, but I guess as a customer, it wasn't an essential part of my life, really. And you've shifted to focusing on things that have got a much more critical importance.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of applications for the technology, the product that we're building. So I did my clinical work a little over a decade ago in endocrinology, and the first place that we proved this work in a randomized controlled trial was in diabetes and weight management. And so my first company, Intuitive Automata, was bringing that to market. But one of the challenging lessons learned there from selling to a lot of different kinds of customers. So we did direct to individual, direct to consumer sales. We sold to pharma, payers, providers, self-insured employers. So, a lot of different aspects of the healthcare business. One thing that we see, the trend's been moving even more in this direction is that, particularly in the US market, individuals don't want to pay for anything having to do with health care directly out of their own pockets, right? We already pay for insurance or we're on Medicare, Medicaid, and that's really the channel that most of the money in the healthcare market flows. So in starting this company, really taking that into account, spending a lot of time talking to the types of customers that we do have today at Catalia Health, let us focus in on this being a much better market to actually get this product in the hands of patients, which is ultimately what we're trying to do.
And I have to just ask one more thing. I know when you were looking for investment, one of your pet peeves was the investors that said, why build a robot? Why not just make the app?
Yeah, that was probably one of the two big sticking points with investors. And what I said in my introduction, right? Same reason that we're all face to face in the same room is what makes this robot work better over the long term. And so there's great, head-to-head comparisons of looking at using a robot versus an app. We could deliver the conversations that we build directly through an app. It'd be much easier to get out there, but they're not going to work. And then coming back to who our customers are, healthcare institutions that actually care about outcomes, then we need to have that whole package together, the hardware, the software, the service that we provide to patients.
Now, I know there's a panel on investing in robotics later in the day, but just one more point on that. Do you think that the investment community became, I suppose, better educated into what robotics was capable of, and that there were reachable, addressable markets, and therefore robotics was investable? Or was it more a case that you finally found the right investors?
I think it's a little bit of each, right? I think what you see represented by most of the companies up here that have raised money from institutional investors is that we're each focused on solving a particular problem, and we're not focused on building robots. And I think that's, broadly speaking, where the opportunity is. Just like your opening comment about, no one up here is building a platform to go sell to other companies that are then going to sell something to, the consumer or the business. It's really about solving a particular problem in the marketplace and understanding, the financial and the economic economic implications of that in terms of building a company. And so, for me, it was more about finding investors who understood healthcare. They had to get robotics enough to understand why we use this technology, but really about solving a particular healthcare problem.
Thank you. Now, Shin, you had a very, very clear idea, and in many ways, this idea goes back quite a long way. What were the obstacles you found in persuading other people that it was the right time for this idea? Was it technological roadblocks? Was it financial roadblocks? Or was it that the market wasn't ready?
Yeah, so back in 2005, we kind of created a vision that we want to change people's folding time into more valuable time. So in the future, everybody in the world will be using some kind of folding robot or appliances. Not just maybe Seven Dreamers product, maybe more competition in the future. But I would like our grandchildren to say, you know what, grandparents used to fold, clothing by hand type thing, Oh my gosh, So that's what the kind of future we imagined back in 2005. So, but as you all know, that the problem of dealing with soft materials such as clothing are so hard, even for the latest robotics and AI engineers. So we knew it's going to be a hard venture, challenges. But so what we tried to do was initially try to gather good engineers. We didn't have much money, but we tried to do what we can do, and then. In first 3 years, we were able to actually find a way to method or prototype to fold the clothing once we place each item in one place. But after that, the hardest problem was instead of people putting the shirt or pajamas, whatever, into one place, we wanted to have a random, randomly accumulated, collected clothing. So we just want to load into some box, and automatically robot arms pick up and then recognizes, spread out, and then place where it start to fold. This part was the hardest problem to solve, and first 3 years was just folding machine. That was okay, but then we spent another probably 6 years to be able to pick up one shirt and spread out and place where it start to fold. So that was the hardest part, and we spent so much time and money, and we were almost broke, of course. We spent so much money, and then fundraising was another big hurdle. But back in 2014, we were able to find a good investor to realize this is going to be the future. It's going to be a big business. So then, since then, we're fortunate that we were able to raise about $100 million so far.
Yes, I see out of all of the companies here, you've raised the most money so far, but then you've needed to survive for quite a long time as you've developed the product. Now, is it the investment in your group with the goal of further products, or do your investors really see that even one appliance in this market has such global promise?
Yeah, so the Seven Dreamers is a little bit strange, weird company that we do all three actually completely different businesses or technology development. One is, for example, one-day disposable medical device for sleep apnea and snoring. That device is sort of money maker now. So we create a business innovate something new. We only try to do something no one has ever done, and then we bring that into product, and then the money we earn from there we just spend for another project. So that's how we kind of kept surviving. Then eventually, finally, there are some good venture capitals that realize this is the future.
This is a really interesting development. I have to say, from my own perspective, I mean, Silicon Valley Robotics itself was founded by robotics companies that wanted to create a more productive ecosystem to support them through the early stages of growth. And I think every person here has leveraged an R&D ecosystem of some fashion, and that still is really where robotics flourishes in the Bay Area. Certain groups that might have several, that form kind of collectives, where it's not purely one company or purely one product, but expertise is shared. It's not really an accelerator model. It's more of a collective R&D model, and now R&D and investment. So is that what you're looking to build with Seven Dreamers Laboratory?
Yeah. So as you all know, that hardware startups has big risk. It takes time. It requires a lot of money, which seems really bad, field. But I don't think that is true. Like, it's true that it's risky at the beginning and then takes time and money. But once it get ongoing, get on a roll, then this is a kind of business model that scale the most. The business scale much more than most IT companies, and then it will be very sustainable. So the challenge is our first few years, when we really, really need the money to make the prototypes and the real product, and that's sometimes some time that we need to be patient and we need to get good support. But once it's over, we're going to scale so big. This is a good area.
And I think what we're starting to see is that robotics is still a small part of the global startup community, but it's so important that robotics companies are able to band together and work together to reach the real potential that's there. Cory, do you want to say a little bit about how you survived those lean seed years?
Doing everything as cheaply as possible, mostly. So, I mean, in my first company, which I ran for 5 years, we raised less than $1 million in capital total. Based it not here in Silicon Valley. I couldn't have afforded to do that. I was based out of Hong Kong for about 6 years, and really focused on iterating the product, understanding the market better. So when it came to starting Catalia Health, I had half a dozen years of startup experience behind me and more than a decade of building this technology, and really had a very clear idea of what the technology was that we were building, who the customers were that we were going after, and the type of team that we needed to build. So that let us move a lot faster with this company.
Yes, so the reason you were in Hong Kong was there was more support given in terms of grant or accommodations and facilities in Hong Kong than
Yeah,
the
so
Valley.
about a decade ago, received a grant from the government, followed by some loans, and then just the cost of setting up a company and hiring talent there was, at that point in time, much more attractive than here in Silicon Valley, on the amount of money that could be raised to support a company where robotics was a key piece of the technology.
And you raise another point, which is we're starting to see serial entrepreneurs in the field of robotics, people who've had the experience of more than one company and growing it, and that allows you to, understand the pitfalls ahead. It can give investors more confidence in your ability to deliver, and you already have developed quite a network to support. Sugie, would you say that you've leveraged previous entrepreneurial experience, or have you had to carve your own pathway for the first time?
Yeah, so I think this time is this is the first time. It's the second time, but the almost the first time to build the hardware startup company. So I think what we have in a strong point is that I think we have R&D team in Tokyo, Japan, and then we are hiring a lot of the hardware software engineers in Tokyo. I think nowadays as you guys know still 2 years ago, 3 years ago a lot of the giant company such as electric the companies, a lot of companies kind of they're getting the decrease. I mean, so that's I think now is the people late 20s or early 30s, all of engineers kind of starting the thinking what we have to do, what we want to do, something like this. And then that being said, kind of easy to hire, great hardware engineer, software engineer, in Japan right now. And then a lot of people, excited about what we're trying to do right now. So I think that kind of things very strong point for region aspect, R&D team to build an R&D team in Tokyo.
It's a very good point. I think a lot of companies, robotics companies, are trying to leverage the fact that you're working on something that has a real impact in the world. You're not just going to be a cog in the machine at, a large company. You can have a much greater feeling of creating impact. Now, I should like to remind everyone that if you've got questions for any of the panelists, there are microphones to the side of the stages. If you would like to line up at the microphones, we'll have time to take some questions. And Rich, as I said, your company on paper is the youngest of the bunch, but the reality is, first off, you were director of robotics at SRI International and involved in developing quite a number of other spin-offs and startups. But you leveraged quite a period of research and development through some of the DoD grants as well for various projects. Would you like to share some light on the iteration of Superflex before spinning out?
Yeah, so definitely in our case, being affiliated with SRI and having access to that technology gave us a head start. And although we started in 2015, we've raised over $12 million between our seed and A round, and getting ready to raise money again. That technology position is part of our differentiation, the combination of technology and clothing that was provided at SRI. But kind of one of the things I'd like to continue on is this theme around people and management. And to me, that's actually one of the interesting things about what we're doing, is that the technology is a necessary element of the company that you're creating and the product you're creating, but the people are actually way more important than the technology. So every single person here, like when you connect with somebody with a background in robotics and with a CEO of another company, believe me, we're not talking about robotics. We're saying, who's your investor you're talking to? How's that going? How's your hiring? Do you need any people? Like, there's so many aspects of running a company, and sort of understanding the robotics part and the differentiation for your product is one, but being able to raise money and being able to hire people and negotiate contracts and being able to negotiate your customer relationships. I've made the point in the past that iRobot and Intuitive Surgical are often referred to and are really successful robotics companies that people know about. But if you go look at their history, it took about 10 years for them to survive to get to the point where they were able to do their IPOs and to actually have a clarity on their customer base. And my point is that they aren't examples of successful robotics companies. They're examples of successfully managed robotics companies. And a lot of what you're hearing here is how are we surviving by getting, we have a passion for the product and the solution that we're going to create, but it really is the people. And then the connection, the investors, they're not just money, they're people as well. You're looking for people that want to share the risk with you, or their profession is to put that money at risk, and so you're asking for them to have a business relationship with you. So to me, robotics is a lot more about people than it is the technology.
I've certainly seen the iteration in what's needed in the Silicon Valley area from robotics companies, where for the first 5 years, the real pressing need that everyone had was, we need to get investment. We need to have better pitches, better understanding of our customers, and a little bit of seed funding, and we need to speak to investors. And of course, all of those companies have raised money, and now the questions are, we need to hire, we need to manage better, we need to talk about operations. It's not about robotics, it's about how do you manage a successful robotics business. So the entire scope of our organization has shifted a little bit. But Steve, can I ask you to go back a little bit and talk about before Savioke, when you were managing Willow Garage? Because not only did Willow Garage spin out a lot of robotics companies, but you also created things that have been foundational for the robotics industry generally going forward.
Yeah, so Whiil was a pretty unique place in history. It was around for only about 6 years. By the time at its peak, it was about 85 people, although we had something like 140 interns come through. And so it really was a training ground for roboticists and a way to bring people together. I think what's really interesting about robotics is that it's just robotics itself is such a challenging technical discipline because you've got hardware, you've got software, you've got electrical engineering, you've got design, which really matters, you've got human-robot interaction, which is kind of like human-computer interaction on steroids. And then you have to figure out a use case for what is this thing going to do, and then you've got to figure out the business case if you're coming from the robotics side, or as Cory said, you can start on the business side and say, what needs to be done, but it's really a kind of a double helix where you have the dance of the necessary and the possible. What can I do? What needs to be done? What can I do? What needs to be done? And you kind of spiral up this until you get something that's valuable, and then you try to answer the questions about return on investment. So it's a really challenging problem. Going back to Whiil Garage, we created the robot operating system because we felt like if we could create a software layer that let lots of different companies leverage the work of each other. And in particular, we were focused on academics. Can we get the graduate students across the world so that they can share code with each other, which was something that just wasn't happening back in 2007. That gave us all a platform on which we could build. So you don't have to solve, when you start a new company, you don't have to solve every single robotics problem. For us, we knew that hardware takes longer than software, and I asked our team, how fast can we iterate on hardware to figure out what it is that we're trying to do? So it's about learning the match, and we did a prototype a month for 5 months, getting to the hardware and software, basically working robot that we used to kind of convey the vision to raise our seed round. And then 5 more months we put one into a hotel, which is crazy, right? I mean, to put a 10-month-old company to put a hardware product, hardware and software into a hotel was crazy. And we could only do that because we leveraged all the software work that had been done at Whiil.
Yes, there is not a startup today that I talk to, and I talk to a lot because we do global startup competitions, that isn't leveraging ROS at some stage of their prototyping. And indeed, the ability to leverage things, whether it's a Kinect sensor or some other off-the-shelf piece of hardware, and now ROS, has been critical in allowing startups in robotics to iterate very quickly. Now, if there are questions, we've only got another 5-10 minutes. I've got plenty of questions of my own, so no need to stand up, but this is your last chance to ask questions of the panel. Now, just a really quick poll along here. How many of you have CMOs, Chief Marketing Officers, as companies? This is a question to all of you.
As opposed to a VP of marketing?
Is it a VP of marketing?
Yeah.
Okay, well, VP of marketing, how many have that? Not yet. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Okay, I'm learning a lot about marketing now. How many people in the audience are marketers? Okay, not so many. How many people in the audience are industrial designers or people engaged in need finding, customer discovery? Okay. Would you consider yourselves a marketing person? There's a little bit of a turf dispute over whether something is design or marketing. And what I tend to see in robotics companies is that marketing is seen as sales. It's what you do after you've built everything and all the decisions are made, and then you get someone to go and tell the story in all of the channels. Is that how it sounds like that's the definition of marketing we have here?
I think the word that's missing from that whole conversation is product, right? So figuring out, and product requires you to understand the use case, what this thing is going to be for. In large companies, I think marketing does a lot of that function. They talk to customers, they get things back, and there's lots of different aspects of marketing. But product in a startup is usually owned by the CEO for this first period of time, or by a small number of founders. And so that's why you often see on a technical challenge, like in a robotics company, you often see starting without marketing and then bringing in marketing. And marketing is not, I don't think we think of it as sales. I think we think of marketing as as understanding and communicating with the general public, which takes a lot of time if done right, which is why we have a VP of marketing. And at some point, you need to actually start spinning the wheel to sell. But that's only after you understand that you've got the product right and that people are actually going to buy it. And then you try to scale it up.
Yes, this is one of the reasons why I think that we need more design and product marketing, product management focuses early on. You know, one of the things I found most influential from Willow Garage was actually Caroline Pantaforu's paper on need finding. Well, there were several papers on need finding, I think, out of Willow Garage. And it was how do you engage in the processes of finding your customers and finding out what they want before you prototype.
And I use the word use case for that, right? Who's going to use this and what are they going to use it for? And you know, even when we say we're going to build a delivery robot, that's too general. It's the focus theme of startups. What is it we're doing? Who are we focusing on? Can we actually make this thing work? And once you understand that, you know, in our case, you're going to deliver to guests in a hotel room, all the other stuff is supporting that goal of successfully delivering things. And then the interesting thing is when you actually go to the second use case or the third use case that the same or similar product applies to, and now you're starting to get to a platform. But I think as Cory said earlier, you start with a focused use case, you solve it, and then you generalize from there.
And so for everyone else here, would you say that that responsibility lies with the CEO? And when you go to look for people to help you with that, what discipline do you call it?
Yeah, so in my case, it definitely resided with me initially in terms of the product vision, but and I think product management is a good way to highlight that. Industrial design. It's all the market-facing elements of the product that are sometimes overlooked when you just think about this hardware robot system. So in our case, we have a very strong culture of interaction with our intended customers. So we have a role of fit models, over 100 people aged 65 to 95 that are constantly coming through and trying things on for us and giving us feedback. We do have industrial designers on staff. Our top our VP design, Chris Gadway, was global design director for the North Face. So we have really strong DNA in terms of that customer-facing expectation of clothing. So I do think to be successful, you have to build your company around what the market and the customer expects, not just the technical solution that is the robotics part.
That's a great answer. And we can keep diving into it, but there's a question over here.
Yes. Hello, my name is Malte Würz. I'm a cybersecurity consultant from Germany. And I wondered, my question goes to all panelists, did some of you already planned or maybe already done some security into your product in terms of like a secure development lifecycle or something similar?
So I can address that really quickly. I mean, we're in healthcare, so security is incredibly important. You know, the entire platform, the robot, the back end has to be HIPAA compliant. We have to have outside auditors looking at the security, so it's a key piece of everything that we do.
Yeah, I think there are two key elements here. One is you must design robot products that comply with standards and obey the laws, which are very clear in the area of health. And they must be reliable products. And in the area of HRI that, again, Henrik was touching on, is we don't want to overhype the capabilities of robots. And I believe everybody here designs robots that are products that don't try to be more than what they do. There's a very important design principle in designing downwards so that you don't create excessive expectations. Cory, I think you're the only one here who has a face that engages in actual conversation, because Relay interacts but is very deliberately not with a face, well, not with conversation.
So, yeah, I think the way that robotics people address the security question is by looking at all the use cases that are out there. So, I mean, all the failure cases. So when you look at industrial robots, they're put behind cages, and there's a lockout that basically if you open up that cage door, the robot will shut off. So that's the approach there. And so even if you would hack the robot, it's bolted to the floor inside of a workspace where it can't move somewhere else. In our case, we asked the question of if somebody hacked the robot, or if the robot software ran amok somehow, what's the worst that could happen with the robot? How hard could it run? How fast can it go? Can it bump into somebody? So that's the first level defense against somebody hacking into the robot, is just thinking through the consequences of what if the robot went bad. And then, of course, you layer all the other safety and security stuff on top of it. You make it only accessible through VPNs, you use encryption, you use state-of-the-art security techniques. But as Cory said, and as Andra said, there's laws that tell you what you have to do. But then when you're going to put a service out there, you got to meet or exceed those things.
That's a great answer. Robots must exceed our expectations to be accepted in society. And unfortunately, we're going to leave it there so that the next panel can start on time. I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists.